I was halfway across the Callahan backyard with a 20-pound cooler digging into my fingers when my best friend's mother leaned close and whispered the sentence that ruined my entire 4th of July. "She's been practicing your last name." I nearly dropped the cooler on my own foot. Across the yard, Ava Callahan stood under a string of red, white, and blue paper lanterns, laughing at something her uncle said, while smoke from the grill curled behind her like a movie scene. She had her hair pinned up badly, which meant she'd done it herself in a hurry, and one loose strand kept slipping against her cheek. I had known Ava for 11 years. I knew she hated mustard but put it on burgers when she was nervous, because she thought it made her seem easygoing. I knew she cried every time the old golden retriever in those dog food commercials found his way home. I knew she kept a tire gauge in her glove compartment, but had never once used it correctly. I did not know she had been practicing my last name. My name is Ethan Walker. I was 29 years old that summer, old enough to know better than to fall in love with my best friend, and apparently young enough to still be stupid about it. I ran a small marine repair shop 2 towns over, the kind of place where people brought boats they swore had just one little problem. Right before I discovered a raccoon had moved into the wiring, my life was simple. Grease under my nails, coffee too late in the day, rent paid mostly on time. Ava was not simple. She taught 3rd grade, could organize 28 8-year-olds with one raised eyebrow, and somehow still lost her keys twice a week. She was warm in a way that made people confess things near her. Cashiers told her about their divorces. Strangers in parking lots asked her opinion on flower arrangements. Once, a man at a gas station asked her whether he should call his daughter after 10 years, and Ava said, "Yes, but don't make her comfort you." Then bought a cherry slushie and walked away like she hadn't just performed emotional surgery. She was my best friend, which was exactly the problem. I set the cooler down beside the folding table with more force than necessary. Ice sloshed, soda cans clinked. Mrs. Callahan, whose first name was Denise but who had terrified me since I was 18, gave me a look over the top of her sunglasses. "You heard me," she said. "I'm choosing not to." "That's cowardly. That's survival." She smiled like she had just caught a fish. "Ethan Walker, don't pretend you haven't been looking at my daughter like she's the last open parking spot at the beach." I choked. "Mrs. Callahan." "What?" "I'm old, not blind." "You're not old." "Good recovery, still lying." Behind us, someone lit a string of firecrackers too early, and half the yard yelled at Ava's cousin Brandon for nearly scaring the potato salad into next week. The Callahan family BBQ was a yearly disaster with traditions. Burnt hot dogs, illegal fireworks purchased by men who should have known better, 3 competing playlists, and at least one aunt crying over "God bless America." I had been coming since college. Back then, Ava and I were just 2 broke freshmen in the same campus coffee shop, both pretending we understood the difference between philosophy and sleep deprivation. She borrowed my notes. I borrowed her confidence. Somewhere between all-night study sessions and emergency rides to the airport, we became the kind of friends people assumed had already dated. We hadn't. Not once. Not even during the winter storm sophomore year when the dorm lost power and she fell asleep with her head on my shoulder under the same blanket. Not even at her sister's wedding when she caught the bouquet, turned bright red, and threw it at me like it was evidence. Not even 2 months ago when she showed up at my shop after a terrible day, sat on the floor beside a half-disassembled outboard motor and said, "Sometimes I think you're the only man who doesn't make me tired." I had wanted to say, "That's because I'm in love with you." Instead, I said, "That's the nicest thing anyone said to me near a fuel pump." Because I was brave with engines and useless with Ava. Denise picked up a tray of burger buns and nodded toward the porch. "She changed 3 times before you got here. She always changes 3 times. Not into that dress." I looked again before I could stop myself. Ava wore a blue sundress with tiny white flowers, the kind that looked casual until you realized it fit her like it had been worn ahead of time. The hem moved around her knees when the breeze crossed the yard. She was barefoot in the grass, one hand wrapped around a lemonade, the other gesturing animatedly as she told a story. Then she glanced over. At me. Her smile shifted. Not bigger exactly. Softer. That was the dangerous part about Ava. She could look at me in a crowded backyard and make everything else go quiet. I lifted one hand. She lifted her lemonade in a tiny salute, then mouthed, "You're late." I mouthed back, "Your cooler is heavy." She narrowed her eyes playfully and started across the lawn. Denise leaned close again. "For the record, Walker Callahan sounds ridiculous. Callahan Walker is better. I'm begging you to stop." She wrote both. My stomach did something embarrassing. Ava reached us before I could respond. "Mom, why does Ethan look like you just told him where babies come from?" Denise patted my arm. "Because your friend is delicate." "I am not delicate," I said. Ava looked me up and down, slow enough to make my ears heat. "You carried one cooler and now you're standing like a Victorian widow." It was full of drinks. It had seltzer in it. Seltzer has weight. Two men who skip leg day. Denise made a pleased little sound and walked away, absolutely not discreetly. Ava leaned in to grab a can from the cooler, and her shoulder brushed my chest. It was nothing. It was also enough to make me forget the English language. She smelled like sunscreen and peaches. "You okay?" she asked quietly. "Fine." "You have your trying to solve a boat noise face." "I have a boat noise face?" "You have many faces. That one says, if I tighten one more bolt, maybe God will explain women." I laughed despite myself. Her eyes stayed on mine a second too long. "I'm glad you came." "I always come." "I know." Her voice dipped. "That's why it matters." There it was again. That little open door she sometimes left between us. A sentence that sounded friendly if you were scared, and like an invitation if you weren't. I was scared. Not of rejection exactly. Rejection I could survive. I'd survived worse. My father walking out when I was 13 had taught me people could love you and still leave if staying cost them something. What terrified me was losing the one person who had stayed without making a performance out of it. If I told Ava the truth and she didn't feel the same, I wouldn't just lose a chance. I might lose Sunday coffee. Midnight texts, her ridiculous voice messages, the spare key under my shop's cash register because she once locked herself out of her apartment 3 times in 1 month. I might lose the best part of my life. So I did what cowards do. I made a joke. "I came for your dad's ribs." Ava tilted her head. "Not for me?" The question landed soft, but it did not feel casual. Before I could answer, Brandon shouted from the deck, "Ava, tell Ethan about the name thing." Every adult within 10 feet went silent. Ava froze. My pulse hit like a firework in my chest. Denise, from near the burger buns, whispered, "Oh, that idiot boy." Ava slowly turned toward her cousin. "Brandon." He held up both hands, grinning, oblivious and doomed. "What? It's cute. You know, how you wrote Ava Walker on that napkin like 100 times at game night?" The backyard noise seemed to tilt away from us. Ava's face went pink, then pale, then something more fragile than either. I looked at her, and for once there was no joke ready in my mouth. She swallowed. "Ethan," she said softly, "can we talk?" And before I could decide whether my life was about to begin or end, she took my hand in front of her entire family and led me toward the side gate. Ava did not let go of my hand. That was the first thing my brain managed to understand as she pulled me through the side gate and into the narrow strip of yard between her parents' garage and the hydrangeas. The second thing was that her hand fit in mine better than any hand had a right to. Behind us, the Callahan BBQ roared back to life in muffled pieces. Music, laughter, someone yelling that the corn was on fire. But out here, shaded by the garage and smelling faintly of charcoal and cut grass, it felt like we had stepped behind the curtain of the world. Ava dropped my hand. I hated that I noticed. She paced 3 steps away, then turned back with her arms folded. "I can explain." "I would love that." Her eyes narrowed. "Don't use your calm mechanic voice on me." "My what?" "That voice you use when someone says their engine is making a funny little sound, and you already know it's going to cost them $800. I'm not diagnosing you. You look like you are. I'm mostly diagnosing Brandon." Despite herself, her mouth twitched. "Terminal idiot? Advanced stage." Ava laughed once, but it came out shaky. Then she looked down at the grass between us, and my humor abandoned me. Ava! She pressed her lips together. I had seen her handle a classroom during a fire drill. I had seen her argue a phone bill down by $30 using nothing but patience and the phrase, "Help me understand." I had seen her smile through a bridesmaid dress the color of oatmeal. I had almost never seen her scared. "I didn't write it 100 times," she said. "Okay." It was maybe 6. Very restrained. And it was not because I'm insane. I didn't think that. Her gaze snapped up. "You didn't?" "No." Her shoulders lowered a fraction. I stepped closer, slow enough that she could stop me if she wanted. She didn't. The space between us shrank until I could see the tiny gold flecks in her brown eyes and the place where a curl had escaped near her ear. "Why did you write it?" I asked. Ava breathed in, then out. "Because I was trying to scare myself." That was not what I expected. I waited. She rubbed her thumb along the inside of her wrist, a nervous habit I knew well. At game night, Tessa asked everybody one of those stupid questions. Like, if you had to marry one person you know tomorrow, who would it be? My heart forgot how to do its job. "And you wrote my name?" "No." She winced. "I said your name. Out loud, immediately. Like my brain had been waiting years to betray me." I stared at her. She gave a helpless little laugh. Everyone thought I was joking. I tried to make it a joke. Then later, I was cleaning up and there was this napkin. And I wrote Ava Walker because I wanted to see if it felt ridiculous. I forced air into my lungs. Did it? No. The word fell between us like a lit match. Ava looked away first toward the front yard where little kids were streaking past with glow bracelets even though the sun hadn't fully gone down. "It felt terrifying," she said. Which was worse? I had imagined this moment in 1,000 different ways over the years. Usually I was better dressed. Usually I had a plan. Sometimes there were candles. Once, during a particularly pathetic winter, there was a horse-drawn carriage, which was absurd because Ava hated horses and I was mildly allergic to hay. In none of my imaginary versions was I standing beside a garage while her cousin's voice echoed through the siding shouting, "Who wants a hot dog?" But Ava was looking at me like I was the question and the answer, and suddenly I didn't care about the setting. "I've thought about it too," I said. Her face changed. "About my last name?" I took another step closer. "About you." She went very still. I had crossed some invisible line. I could feel it beneath my feet. "For how long?" she asked. I laughed under my breath because the honest answer was ridiculous. "Long enough that if I tell you, you're going to be mad at me." "Try me." "College." Ava blinked. "College? Probably sophomore year." "Sophomore?" She pressed a hand to her forehead. "Ethan, I warned you." "The blanket night?" I looked at the hydrangeas. "Oh my God," she whispered. "The blanket night. In my defense, you fell asleep on me." "In your defense?" "I woke up and you were holding my hand. You grabbed it." "I did not." "You absolutely did." "I was unconscious." "You were bossy unconscious." She made a sound between a laugh and a groan, then covered her face with both hands. "We are so stupid." I reached for her wrists gently. "Hey." She let me lower her hands. Her eyes shone, not quite with tears, but close enough to make my chest ache. "Why didn't you say anything?" she asked. The truth was ugly in a quiet way. But if she was standing here with her heart showing, I owed her mine. "Because you were my safest place," I said, "and I was afraid if I wanted too much, I'd lose what I had." Ava's expression softened until it nearly broke me. "Ethan," she whispered. "I know." "No, you don't." She moved closer this time, close enough that the blue flowers on her dress brushed my jeans. "You were my safest place too. That was the problem. Every time I dated someone else, I'd compare them to you, and then I'd feel unfair and terrible because nobody was you." My hands were still around her wrists. Her pulse beat under my thumbs. "I hated those guys," I admitted. A smile tugged at her mouth. "You were very polite." "I'm capable of suffering with manners." You once fixed Derek's flat tire. I considered loosening it again. Ava laughed, and this time it was real. It spilled through the little hidden yard and loosened something in me I'd been holding tight for years. Then she looked at my mouth. Every nerve in my body paid attention. Ava, I said, and my voice sounded rougher than I meant it to. Yes? If I kiss you and this is some kind of emotional 4th of July temporary insanity? It's not. Then we should probably set rules. Her eyebrows lifted. Rules? I'm new to kissing my best friend in your parents' side yard. You're overthinking. I've built a life on it. She stepped up on her toes, her hands sliding to the front of my shirt. Then stop. So I did. I kissed her. Not like I had imagined when I was 20 and lonely and she was asleep beside me under a blanket. Not like a stolen thing. Not like a mistake. I kissed her slowly, with one hand at her waist and the other brushing the escaped curl from her cheek. She made the smallest sound against my mouth, surprised and relieved, and I felt it all the way through me. Then she kissed me back. Ava Callahan kissed like she argued, fully committed, warm, and with no patience for me pretending I was in control. Her fingers curled in my shirt, my hand flattened against her back. Somewhere beyond the gate, fireworks cracked early in the distance, but they were nothing compared to the bright, impossible thing happening between us. When we finally broke apart, her forehead rested against mine. Well, she breathed. I swallowed. Yeah. I practiced Ava Walker. I heard. But if this goes badly, she said, still breathless, I'm changing my name to something dramatic and moving to Vermont. I'll follow you and fix snowmobiles. Her smile trembled. Don't joke right now. I brushed my thumb along her waist. I'm not. She searched my face. The side gate creaked. We both turned. Denise stood there holding a platter of ribs, trying and failing to look innocent. Sorry, she said. I was just checking whether I should set 2 extra places at the wedding table. Ava closed her eyes. Mom! I should have been embarrassed. Instead, with Ava's hand still gripping my shirt, I started laughing. Denise lasted exactly 4 seconds before pretending to remember she had somewhere else to be. I'm not here, she announced, while very much being there. I saw nothing. I know nothing, except that your father owes me $20. Ava pulled away from me so fast she nearly stepped on my shoe. You bet on us? Denise adjusted the ribs. Sweetheart, the whole family bet on you. The whole family? Not the children. We're not monsters. I leaned one shoulder against the garage and tried not to enjoy myself too visibly. Ava pointed at me. Do not look amused. I'm terrified. You're smiling. That's my fear response. Denise looked between us, her eyes softening beneath all the mischief. For what it's worth, it's about time. Ava's face went red again, but she didn't deny anything. That tiny fact settled into me with ridiculous warmth. Then Denise turned to me. And you? I straightened automatically. Yes, ma'am. If you hurt her, I'll put sugar in your gas tank. Mom, Ava gasped. What? He fixes engines. He'll appreciate the specificity. I won't hurt her, I said. The words came out before I could polish them into something clever. They were plain. They were true. Denise studied me for a beat, then nodded, like I had passed some old family test. Good. Now come eat before your uncles turn the ribs into jerky. She disappeared through the gate. For a second, Ava and I stood there in the quiet, both pretending our mouths weren't still swollen from kissing. Then she looked at me sideways. The whole family? I'm trying to decide if I'm offended no one invited me into the betting pool. You would have bet against us. I would have bet on you figuring it out first. She laughed, but there was a nervous edge under it. We have to go back in there. Eventually. They're going to stare. Yes. My Aunt Maribel is going to cry. Probably. My dad is going to do that thing where he acts normal but grips your shoulder hard enough to change your height. I'll bend my knees. Ava smiled, then reached for my hand again. This time, she threaded her fingers through mine deliberately. My chest tightened. It wasn't a kiss. It wasn't dramatic. But somehow in that moment it felt bigger. Like she was choosing to be seen with me. Like she was done hiding in napkins and almost questions. Ready? She asked. No. Me neither. We went anyway. The backyard noticed us instantly. Not because anyone shouted. That would have been kinder. No, the Callahans did something much worse. They all got quiet in waves. First the table near the grill, then the cousins by the cooler, then Aunt Maribel, who took one look at our joined hands and pressed both palms to her chest as if she'd personally arranged the marriage in 1872. Brandon stood by the chips, looking guilty for the first time in his life. Ava's grip tightened. I squeezed back. Her father, Frank Callahan, stood at the grill with tongs in one hand and an expression carved from granite. I had known Frank for years. He had taught me how to patch drywall, loaned me a ladder, and once told me I was not entirely useless, which from him was practically a sonnet. His gaze dropped to our hands, then he looked at me. Burger? He asked. The entire yard exhaled. Yes, sir, I said. Thank you. He flipped a patty onto a bun and handed it over. Then, exactly as predicted, he gripped my shoulder with enough force to realign my spine. Don't be dumb, he said quietly. I'll do my best. Do better than that. Yes, sir. Ava leaned into my side to hide her laugh, and the feel of her there, warm, solid, willingly close, nearly undid me. For the next hour, the BBQ became a strange combination of celebration and interrogation. Aunt Maribel cried. Brandon apologized with a paper plate piled so high with brownies it looked like a legal settlement. Ava's little cousins asked if we were boyfriend-girlfriend now, and Ava, to my complete shock, looked at me before answering. Well, she said. In front of a half-dozen children, 3 adults pretending not to listen, and 1 elderly neighbor wearing star-shaped sunglasses, I felt my ears burn. Are you asking me? I said. I'm giving you a chance to be romantic. That seems unfair with this many witnesses. You kissed me behind a garage. Your standards aren't that high. The kids giggled. I turned to them with as much dignity as a man holding a ketchup-dripping burger could manage. Yes, if she'll have me. Ava's smile went soft in that dangerous way again. I'll have him, she said. A cheer broke out from the cousin table. Someone clapped. Aunt Maribel made a sound like a tea kettle, and Ava, bold as anything, rose up on her toes and kissed my cheek. Just my cheek. Still, it branded me. Later, when the sky turned bruised purple and the first real fireworks were still half an hour away, Ava tugged me toward the back of the yard, past the shed and through the little gap in the hedges that led to the creek. When we were teenagers, well, when she was a teenager, and I was an awkward college freshman trying to seem more adult than I was, we used to sit on the old wooden footbridge there during parties to escape the noise. Back then, I'd listen to her talk about exams, her parents, her dreams of having a classroom full of books and bright windows. Now the bridge creaked under our feet as we sat side by side, our shoulders touching. The yard glowed behind us with lanterns. Ahead, fireflies blinked over the dark water. Ava rested her head on my shoulder. I went still. She sighed. You can breathe, Ethan. I am breathing. You're doing it like someone gave you instructions in another language. I let out a careful breath, and she laughed softly. For a while, we just sat there. Then she said, Are you scared? I looked down at our hands still tangled between us. Yes. Me too. That comforted me more than it should have. I don't want to mess us up, she said. I know everyone's acting like this is cute and inevitable, but it's us. It's not a movie. If we're careless, we won't be. You don't know that. No, I admitted. But I know how to show up for you. I know how to listen when you're pretending you don't need anything. I know you get quiet when you're hurt, and bossy when you're worried, and mean to board games when you're losing. I am strategic. You threatened a Scrabble tile. It knew what it did. I smiled and turned toward her. I know being with you is worth being scared. Her eyes searched mine in the dim light. Then she reached up and touched my jaw, slowly, like she was testing whether she was allowed. I leaned into her hand. I've loved you for a long time, she whispered. everything in me stopped. A firework burst somewhere beyond the trees, red light flickering over her face. I had waited years to hear those words in her voice. I had imagined them carelessly, desperately, accidentally, but nothing prepared me for how quiet they were, how brave. I covered her hand with mine. Ava, you don't have to say it back right now. I almost laughed. I've been trying not to say it since I was 20. Her lips parted. I love you, I said. I love you when you're late. I love you when you steal my fries and call it taxation. I love you when you leave teacher stickers on my invoices. I love you so much I turned it into friendship because I didn't know what else to do with it. Her eyes filled. You are so annoying, she whispered. I know. Then she kissed me on the bridge while fireworks cracked open above the trees. This kiss was different from the first. Less surprise. More promise. Her fingers slid into my hair and I pulled her closer until there was no polite space left between us. The creek moved beneath us. The whole country celebrated somewhere in the distance. But the only thing I cared about was Ava smiling against my mouth like she'd finally come home. When we broke apart, she kept her forehead against mine. So, she whispered. Boyfriend. I grinned. Girlfriend. She laughed, and I kissed her again before either of us could overthink it. By the time we walked back from the creek, Ava's lipstick was gone, and my hair looked like I had survived a small, affectionate tornado. The Callahans noticed. Of course they noticed. Ava's grandmother took one look at us and said, well, finally. Then went back to eating coleslaw like she hadn't just closed an 11-year investigation. Ava hid her face against my arm. I'm leaving the country. You don't have a passport. I'll swim. You hate lakes. I hate this more. I bent close to her ear. You kissed me during the national anthem of fireworks. You're going to have to develop thicker skin. She shivered. It was tiny, almost nothing, but I felt it. Ava looked up at me, and for 1 second, the whole crowded yard vanished again. Her cheeks were pink from embarrassment, her eyes bright from everything we had said on that bridge, and I had the unreasonable urge to pull her behind the garage again and kiss her until her family started taking new bets. Instead, I brushed my thumb over the back of her hand. She smiled. That was the dangerous thing about crossing the line with your best friend. Every familiar gesture became new territory. Holding her hand wasn't just holding her hand. It was a declaration, a discovery, a small, public promise. We helped clean up after the fireworks. Or Ava helped. I mostly got assigned tall person jobs by Denise, which meant taking down lanterns while every aunt in the yard asked me how long I'd been courting Ava. Courting? I repeated to Aunt Maribel. She waved a trash bag at me. I'm trying to be classy. Ava passed behind me with a stack of plates. He's been courting me since sophomore year, apparently, very slowly, like a glacier with commitment issues. I had a process, I said. You had a decade. A thorough process. She laughed and bumped her hip against mine as she passed. It was playful, casual, devastating. Around 10 people started leaving with sleepy children and leftover pie. The backyard emptied in stages until only the porch lights remained, glowing over crumpled napkins and the scent of smoke. I should have gone home. That was what the old version of me would have done. Make a joke, kiss her forehead, maybe if I was feeling brave, then retreat before wanting too much. But Ava was standing by the cooler, barefoot in the grass, looking at me like she was wondering the same thing. I walked over. Can I take you somewhere? I asked. Her eyebrows lifted. It's 10 at night. I know. On the 4th of July. Very observant. Everything is closed. Not everything. A slow smile curved her mouth. Ethan Walker, are you asking me on a date? My pulse kicked. We had said, I love you. We had kissed under fireworks. Her entire family had basically drafted wedding invitations. And somehow, asking for a date made me nervous. Yes, I said. A real one. Not a family BBQ. Not coffee where you grade spelling tests and steal my muffin. A date. Her smile softened. Right now? Right now. She looked toward the house, then back at me. Give me 5 minutes. She took 4. She came back wearing white sneakers with her blue dress and carrying a red cardigan. If this date involves a gas station hot dog, I'm reconsidering everything. I would never start with a gas station hot dog. Start with? Don't limit our future. She laughed, and I opened the passenger door of my truck for her. She paused before getting in, studying me in the porch light. What? I asked. You've never done that before. Opened a door? For me. I rubbed the back of my neck. Too much? No. She stepped closer instead of getting in. It's different. Bad different? Her fingers touched mine. Good different. Then she kissed me once, quick and sweet, before climbing into the truck like she hadn't just rearranged my internal organs. I drove us to Miller's Point, a little overlook above the river where people parked to watch the last illegal fireworks bloom over town. On the way, Ava controlled the radio like always, except now her hand rested on my thigh between songs, tentative at first. I covered it with mine. She exhaled. We got there just as a cluster of gold sparks scattered above the water. I had packed nothing romantic because I was not a man who had expected his life to change while carrying seltzer. But there was an old blanket behind the seat and a package of slightly melted grocery store cookies from my lunch. Ava stared at the cookies. Wow. I know, luxury. Are these oatmeal raisin? Chocolate chip. She squinted. You're sure? Mostly. She took one and sat beside me on the blanket spread over the truck bed. This is already better than Derek's vineyard date. I fixed his tire and now I'm beating him with suspicious cookies. Excellent. She leaned against my shoulder. You always beat them. The words were soft, but something in them snagged. I looked down. What do you mean? Ava broke a cookie in half, watching crumbs fall onto her dress. Every man I dated had one impossible job. What job? Not being you. The last fireworks reflected in her eyes. The night around us smelled like river water and smoke and sugar. I shifted so I was facing her. Ava, I know we've already said the big things tonight. She gave a nervous laugh, which is insane, by the way. We skipped about 14 steps. We can go back. Can we? Sure. Hi, I'm Ethan. I own too many gray t-shirts, and I've been emotionally compromised by you since the Obama administration. Want a cookie? She laughed hard enough to lean into me, and I caught her by the waist. Then she stayed there, close, her hands resting lightly on my chest. I don't want this to be a moment, she said. I don't want us to wake up tomorrow and get careful again. My humor faded. She looked up at me. I need you to understand that. I can handle slow, I can handle awkward, I can even handle your tragic inability to text using punctuation. But I can't handle being loved by you in private and doubted in daylight. The words hit exactly where I deserved. Because she knew me. She knew my instinct to retreat before the bill came due. She knew I could be steady for everyone except myself. Except the things I wanted most. I took her hand from my chest and pressed it flat over my heartbeat. I'm not going back, I said. Her eyes searched mine. I'll probably be awkward, I admitted. I may panic the first time someone calls me your boyfriend at the hardware store. I might overthink where to put my hand at dinner, even though I've known you half my life. That sounds likely, but I won't doubt you in daylight. I brushed my thumb over her knuckles. And I won't make you wonder whether I meant tonight. Her mouth trembled. I meant it, I said. All of it. She kissed me then. Slowly this time. Deep enough that the last firework cracked unnoticed over our heads. Her knees shifted against mine on the blanket and my hand slid to her back, holding her like she was precious because she was. When she pulled away, she rested her forehead under my jaw. Okay, she whispered. I wrapped both arms around her. Okay? Okay, boyfriend. I smiled into her hair. Okay, girlfriend. For a while we sat in the truck bed watching smoke drift over the river. Her body fit against mine like we had been practicing this too. In all the years we sat almost close enough and pretended not to notice. Then my phone buzzed. I ignored it. It buzzed again. Ava leaned back. You should check that. If it's Brandon asking for odds on our first fight, I'm throwing it into the river. I pulled it out. A text from Denise lit the screen. Don't keep her out too late. Also, she left a notebook on the porch. You may want to ask her about page 12. Actually, no. Ask her tomorrow. Love you both. Ava went perfectly still. I looked at her. Page 12? Her face turned the exact shade of the strawberry jello from the BBQ. Oh no, she said. Ava. She covered her eyes. I can explain. I grinned. That phrase has had a very big day. She peeked at me through her fingers, mortified and beautiful. And suddenly, I wanted tomorrow more than I had ever wanted anything. Ava tried to steal my phone. I lifted it out of reach. She lunged across the blanket in the truck bed, laughing and mortified. Give me that. Absolutely not. Your mother has introduced evidence. My mother is a menace. She said page 12. She says many things. She said love you both. Ava stopped trying to climb over me, so did I. The words sat there between us, small and enormous. Love you both. Ava's expression softened in the glow from the dashboard. She's always loved you. I swallowed. Yeah? She used to pack extra food when she knew you were coming over in college. Ava looked down at our tangled legs. She said you ate like somebody had forgotten to feed you properly. I looked toward the river because that was easier than looking at her. My mom had worked doubles after my father left. We never starved. But there were years when dinner was whatever could be stretched, thawed, or microwaved. The Callahan house had been the first place where food just appeared in abundance and no one counted how much I took. Ava touched my cheek, turning me back to her. You were never a guest to us, she said. The tenderness in her voice nearly did me in. I kissed her palm. You're really trying to distract me from page 12, she groaned. I was being sincere. I know, it was working. Ethan. Ava. She stared at me for 3 seconds, then surrendered with a dramatic flop against my chest. Fine. Page 12 is a list. What kind of list? A private list. Of crimes? Worse. Men you've compared unfavorably to me? That would be a binder. I laughed, wrapping my arms around her. She buried her face in my shirt. It's a list of things I wanted to do with you if I ever got brave enough. My heart stumbled. I looked down at the top of her head. What things? No. Ava. No, because you'll get that face. What face? The one where you look like I handed you something breakable and you're terrified of dropping it. I went quiet. She was right, of course. Slowly, she lifted her head. See? I don't want to drop it, I said. Her eyes softened. Then don't. So I drove her home. Not because the night was over, but because suddenly tomorrow felt like something we had earned. Denise had left the notebook on the porch swing with a sticky note that said, Behave, which could have meant anything and therefore meant nothing. Ava snatched it up and held it to her chest. You are not reading this. I'm your boyfriend now. I have rights. You have cookie privileges and limited porch access. Harsh. She backed toward the front door, smiling. Good night, Ethan. I stepped closer. That's it? Her eyes flicked to my mouth. You're greedy. 11 years? Fair. She came back down one porch step and I met her halfway. The kiss was slower than it needed to be for a porch under a nosy mother's window. Softer, too. Ava's fingers curled at the back of my neck, and I held her waist with the kind of certainty I hadn't allowed myself before that day. When she pulled away, she whispered, Tomorrow. I smiled. Daylight. Her smile answered mine. Daylight. And the next morning, I showed up with coffee, cinnamon rolls, and no exit plan. Ava opened the door in sleep shorts, messy hair, and the expression of a woman who had spent half the night rereading her own embarrassing feelings. You came, she said. I said I would. I know. Her smile trembled. I'm getting used to believing it differently. We sat on her apartment floor because her coffee table was covered in school supplies, and she opened the notebook to page 12 with the caution of someone defusing a bomb. At the top, in Ava's neat teacher handwriting, it said, Things I'd ask Ethan for if I were brave. Underneath were 12 lines. Take me dancing even though neither of us can dance. Hold my hand at the grocery store. Kiss me on New Year's. Let me meet him somewhere as a date, not a friend. Tell me when he's scared instead of making jokes. Stay. I read that last word twice. Then I closed the notebook carefully and pulled her into my lap. I can do those, I said. Her eyes shone. All of them? Especially the last one. We were not perfect after that. Nobody who has known each other that long steps into love without tripping over old habits. The first time I got scared, I did make jokes. The first time she got hurt, she got quiet. But this time, instead of letting silence grow teeth, Ava came to my shop after work, planted herself in my office chair, and said, "We are not ruining this because you're emotionally shaped like a locked toolbox." And I said, "I love you, but that metaphor needs work." Then I told her the truth. She did too. By fall, we had a standing Thursday date. Sometimes dinner. Sometimes hardware store errands where she held my hand in the paint aisle just because it was on the list. Sometimes we cooked at my place, which mostly meant Ava read recipes aloud while I misunderstood them confidently. On New Year's Eve, I kissed her at midnight in front of our friends, and when she whispered, "Page 12," against my mouth, I thought my chest might crack open from happiness. By the following spring, Ava had a drawer at my house, then two, then somehow an entire shelf of mugs with teacher jokes on them. I pretended to complain. She pretended not to know I used her favorite mug whenever she wasn't there because it made the house feel less empty. A year after that 4th of July, we hosted the Callahan BBQ at my place because Frank claimed my grill had more dignity than his. I carried the cooler again. This time, Ava walked beside me, bumping my shoulder with hers. On her left hand was a ring I had given her on the old footbridge by the creek, after reading from my own list titled "Things I Should Have Told Ava Years Ago." Denise saw us coming and dabbed at her eyes before anyone had even said hello. Ava leaned toward me. "If my mom whispers anything weird to you today, ignore her." Too late. Her eyes narrowed. "What did she say?" I set the cooler down and grinned. "She said you've been practicing my last name." Ava looked at her ring, then at me, her smile bright enough to outshine every firework I'd ever seen. "Not practicing anymore," she said. Then Ava Walker, almost officially beautifully, rose on her toes and kissed me in the middle of the backyard, with her family cheering around us and the summer sky opening wide overhead. What would you have done if you carried a cooler into your best friend's family BBQ and her mom whispered that she'd been practicing your last name? Have you ever experienced something similar? Tell me your story in the comments. If you like this one, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.